Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm very excited to share our guest with you. But before we do, I'd like to thank some people that we always thank. We'd like to thank brassandwinds.com. Brass and Winds, Quinn the Eskimo Company. This is where we go when we're looking to order brass or woodwind instruments. They're fine people, and we would highly recommend you check them out at brassandwinds.com. Would you like to learn the piano for free? We're Truer MU, the quickest way to learn piano. You can take an online lesson from one of our teachers, and you can learn quickly and easily. If you'd rather study with a person, check us out at willowschoolga.com. Willow Music is a better way to learn music, and we've got instruction in all sorts of instruments. Check us out at willowschoolga.com. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to a woman, one of the wonderful people that I met through Bree Noble. This is Miss Harriet Reynolds, who is an Austin-based singer-songwriter, has released 3 albums, Full Tide, A Better Life, and Take That Ride, as well as a new single, Silence Is Not Golden. Harriet, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me. I'm impressed you know all those album titles.
I have been listening to your records for the last few days.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Yes. So we'll be talking about those for sure. Your first album came out in 2002. Let's talk about how you got there. Were you musical from a child, or is this something that came later to you?
You know, I really was. I think I started playing piano at about 4. I was listening to your acknowledgments and I thought, well, do you all take failed classical piano students?
Yes, we do. Thank you for asking.
Sign me up. When I was about 4, my mom was an incredible player. And when I was about 4, I would crawl up on the piano bench and just play by ear what I heard, which is probably one reason I'm not a fantastic sight reader today. But I started out pretty early and my parents were pushing me to be a classical player. And I think when I was about 11, I had an audition with a classical trainer in Houston, Texas, where I was from. And she came to my recital and I think I played Rustle of Spring, which has like a gazillion black notes in it. You're probably familiar with that. Lots of sharps. And she said, at the end of the rehearsal or recital rather, she came up and said, you know, I'd love to work with you. And I said, well, great. What does that entail? She goes, oh, you would only have to practice about 3 or 4 hours a night. And so I said, no, thank you. And, you know, it was a real blow to my parents. And of course, now thinking back, I really wish I had pursued that. But, you know, I wanted to play with my friends and hang out. And it just sounded too grueling. And it probably wouldn't be the right path for me. But everything I've done since then has been just teaching myself jazz theory, which I didn't learn then.
Interesting.
You know?
So how did you teach yourself jazz theory? That's a tall order.
A friend of mine and I in high school went out and borrowed our boyfriend's guitars and we taught ourselves a few chords and started doing like, you know, little folk music things. And then we get little TV pilots, little teenage pilot shows, you know, playing guitar and singing harmonies by the pool and all that sort of stuff. So I think really I got much better when I was an adult professional and that's all I was doing for a living. And I was playing a solo gig and I just went out and got a jazz chord book and thought, you know, I'm boring myself. I better learn some new chords. And I taught myself, you know, a fair amount of theory that I didn't really get. So I have a lot of gaps, but, you know, I think I get by okay.
Yeah, it's actually created a very interesting sound for you. Your songs typically are the kind of songs you typically hear in Americana albums. They're folky type things about people, you know, ordinary folks going through ordinary problems. And yet your chords are very 70s chords. I tended to hear, I hope these names won't offend you as I mentioned the people I was thinking of, but I heard Barry Manilow and the Bee Gees and Carly Simon and even Don Henley. These people all came to mind as I listened to your music.
I'm a huge Don Henley fan. Well, all of those people are awesome. No, I don't find that at all offensive. I find it a compliment because I think there was some really good progressions going on then, some really good music, great lyrics, a nice feel. So yes, thank you. I take that as a compliment.
Yes, the Don Henley in particular, I found interesting just because there was something about the way he delivers a message with a little bit of a punch and a little bit of a
Hmm.
bite that I heard in your delivery.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I get older, I find that I'm writing a few more of those sorts of songs. I don't want to declare myself primarily a message player, a writer, because that's sort of limiting. But I do find that more and more I'm writing songs that kind of have a little bit of a social punch to them.
Actually, yeah, on the contrary, from having a message, I think a lot of your songs they come across as being story songs, and yet they're not simply stories about you complaining about your life or whatever your character would be complaining about. There's a sort of compassion in your songs that seems to bring people in. Something like, I'm going through this, are you going through this, we're going through this.
Wow.
It's something a little that I wanted to talk about it with you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good way to put it. I hadn't really thought about it that way. But I used to be a school teacher. I taught, that was my day gig for quite a while. And I really, not that I didn't have it before, but it really honed my empathetic skills, let's
Mhm.
say, or my compassion, my sense of compassion. Not that it wasn't there, but that really honed it. And working with so many kids over the years, and these were older kids, but it really gave me a sense of to really fine tune the listening gene,
Mhm.
and to help synthesize back for the students because I was a writing and literature instructor. So that really also helped me with my own lyrics in terms of how to shape them and how to say the same thing in fewer words or more poetic words. And teaching people to do that, it really helped me to do it a little bit better myself. Of course, I'm still learning. We're all learning.
Were you teaching when you released that first album in 2002, or were you actually trying to be a professional singer-songwriter then?
I actually was a professional before then, but I wasn't writing my own songs. I
Oh,
was with bands and solo gigs and usually doing cover songs. So I didn't really start writing till a little bit later. Um, and I was paired up early on with a guy that was just a professional partner, but we worked together for years, and we had some recording contracts to do Christian music. And he was an amazing writer. And so I just never wrote. I thought, well, he's the writer. I'm just the singer. Yeah, I'm just a girl singer. I'm not the writer. So it really was a little bit later when I started kind of going back to my own acoustic roots that I started writing myself. And I think I'm getting a little off track. You want to repeat your question or just help me extend here
well,
because
no, this is fine. I am curious how you got to Austin from Houston and what you were doing
oh,
initially.
right, right. Well, I remember now you were asking me, was I doing that album while I was teaching? And the answer is yes. My first two albums I did while I had my day gig. And it was not easy to do. But, I'd teach all day and then I'd go into the studio in the evening. The second and third I did in Nashville. I had a producer there. So I could start them at the end of the school year and then go finish in the summer. So
Ah,
that's how I did that. But Austin, I went to undergraduate school here at University of Texas, and I always wanted to get back. Houston is a great community. That's where I grew up, but it doesn't have the singer-songwriter thing going on that we have here in Austin. And the sense of we are the live music capital of the world here, although it hasn't been all that great for the last year. In fact, not at all.
right.
And it's just starting to open up a little bit. But I always wanted to get back to Austin, and when I finished my day gig, I just said I'm going back to my favorite place in Texas anyway. So here I am in Austin.
And so you've been in Austin for the last 20, 30 years?
No, 5.
Oh, I see. I've got confused then. So
Yeah.
help me. Let's get the timeline. So you went back to Austin
Okay.
after undergraduate, and then you left again to go teach?
Yeah, I moved when I graduated from the university. They were really not any jobs here, and so I moved back to Houston, where my hometown was, and paired up with this guy, and we started our band and played together over the years. But the live gigs, I mean, we were playing 6 nights a week, and then I was doing a church gig, a Sunday morning folk mass, and then a coffee hour. I had no time off. but the live music gigs there sort of started drying up in Houston. And so that's when I started kind of going more inward writing, getting solo gigs, duo gigs, small gigs, and then had the day job. So I came back here, 5 years ago.
Hmm. Well, it's very interesting looking at your timeline here. You got an album in 2002, you got an album in 2004, and then you have an album in 2018. What the heck happened?
Yeah, what was that woman doing? Well, that woman was making a living at a really intense day job. I taught in a really, really nice private school in Houston, and it was a big feeder school for the Ivy Leagues, and it was just very intense. I taught junior and senior English, which meant that on paper weeks, I was probably spending 80 hours a week grading papers, and it just got to be too much. So I would do gigs here and there, but it really wasn't until I left that I was able to start doing shows again. And I'm really excited about this sort of turn in the career because, I don't know about other people, but for me, I knew that my day job was getting too intense to put out another album, but I didn't really realize how much headspace and time and interior space it was taking up. And then when I left, it was a little like PTSD for about a year or two. And I just then started doing shows again. And, now I'm back in it full time. But yeah, you're right. The timeline is very interesting because it took that long. And then I left the day gig in about 15 or 16 and then started writing to get enough to do this current album. Mm-hmm. And then really since in the last year and a half, partially through Bree Noble's Female Musician Academy writing group, which I think Gail Gallagher now runs. Mm-hmm. I wrote most of the songs in that group in a sort of a songwriting challenge that are going on the current album I'm doing. And then I have enough to do another album after that. Plus, during the pandemic, I've had a lot of time to write. And I'm doing a live show every week online. So I've been doing a lot of writing that goes sort of along with that. So it's been a crazy ride, I have to say, but I'm back in it full time now.
That's great. I listened to your 2018 album first, and then out of curiosity went back to the early albums. Now, while I do see an increase in perhaps a little maturity and compassion, really, you may disagree with me, but there's not a whole lot of difference in sound between the early albums and the later. They could be 2.2, 2.4, 2.6. Do you find that's the case?
I think that's a great compliment because that was quite a long time ago. I guess so. And it's interesting because some of my fans that I've gotten to know in the last few years who only knew me by my current album started, saying, well, where can we get your other albums? And, gave them links and whatever. And then they'd send a note and go, boy, this is great too. Yeah. So it really made me feel, pretty good. And I will say the first two albums, especially the very first album, was a little bit more produced, a few more tracks than I would have liked, but I was working with a guy who owned a studio for years and he and I knew each other. We played a few live gigs together and I would teach during the day, as I was mentioning, and I'd eat dinner and I'd go about 7 or 8 o'clock. Well, these guys in the studio, they were just getting started. And so I'd leave about 10 and I'd say, hey guys, good night. I've got to go to work in the morning. And I would come in the next night and they had stayed up till 2 or 3 in the morning, just having a ball, putting all these tracks on the album. So I would say, no, I don't think that's going to work. Yeah, that's okay. So that was kind of an interesting way to do it. And the second one I did in Nashville, the current one, was a little bit more to my taste in terms of not having as many tracks. The first one I did in Nashville had a few more tracks and had a lot of steel on it because we were trying to pitch to country artists. Mm-hmm. And, that's not really my forte. So I think the current album I'm working on is probably going to be the closest to the sound that I really want to represent. But I'm not unhappy about any of the old tracks myself. So thank you for saying that. That makes me feel good.
You're welcome. And one of the things that's consistent about you is the musicians you've been working with are top notch. All the people playing on your albums are amazing.
They really are. And the current one, my producer there, that was the second time to work with her. And, she gets a lot of, there's so many A-list studio players there, but she said, I picked players this time that I think would be particularly into your work and you would be into theirs. And I didn't have as many musicians on that, but I had Dow Tomlin is the bass player, and he plays with Winona Judd and her group Big Noise. And he would play the stand-up bass or the electric. I'd just say, let's go with a little acoustic sound here. And he was amazing. And I had Faith Hill and Tim McGraw's drummer, Sean Feisless. He was so sweet and so easy to work with. And then I had a piano player who'd just come off the road with Lori Morgan, and he never got to do a lot of jazz or anthem kind of stuff or more pop. So he was loving working with me. And I actually played on that one. I played guitar, of course, did the vocals. And I did that on my first album, but not the second one. And the current album I'm doing is very different. I'm doing the vocal and guitar tracks at home and then sending them to my new producer here in Austin. She's putting all the other tracks on, and then all of them herself, which is great. And she's an amazing player. So it's been a lot of fun to do. It was nerve-wracking at first because I'd never really recorded at home, and I mean, just fun stuff, but not something that would be on an album. So it's been a real trip.
The track that caught my attention on the most recent album, Take That Ride, was Catch Me If You Can. That one stopped me in my tracks. And you collaborated with Michael Lusk on that album. You want to tell folks who that is?
Yeah, Michael Lusk has worked with Loretta Lynn for I don't know how many years and has played bass and backup singer. And I'd not met him before then. And he came in, producer brought him in. He had just an amazing sense of matching my vocals. And it might have taken just a couple of little extra tweaks here and there. And on that particular song, now I do it live solo now, but I can't make that octave that kind of goes up in the chorus. So that's what I told her. Let's get a guy in here that has a little bit of a tenorish sound who can really make that note soar. And then I'll come in and sing harmony with him. So that's what we did on that one.
Well, you have sent me a video to that song, and why don't we watch it now?
That'd be awesome.
Okay.
I used to sing, you'll never walk alone. The moment in the show when everybody cried. But now the lights are dim and I can't hold my head up high. Now the song's a distant memory. I'm crying every night inside these cardboard walls and wondering how it happened that it all came down to this. If they turn away when they see me on the street, I understand. They might look into my eyes and feel the fear of being where I am. So I'll bless them on their way, turn my eyes to heaven where I stand. If you can see that sparrow fall, please, oh God, then catch me in your hand.
Very beautiful song. Talk about why you wrote it.
It was actually written for another artist, and that's one reason the octave jump doesn't quite work for me the way it needed to be projected. But she's a former opera singer who's just on about 20 or 30 albums and worked all over the world. And now she's transitioned into cabaret, and she's in Chicago. And she called me and asked if I could do some original music for a show that she was doing in New York, and I think it was Binghamton or something like that. And I said, sure, do you have a video? And she goes, well, I don't have a video, but I have the script. And I said, well, just send me the script. So I read the script, and there was this part in the show where she says, you know, no matter how successful I am, I always feel like I'm just one step away from falling into poverty. And she herself personally came from a very, very underprivileged background and ended up studying at Juilliard and going on to do opera all over the world. But it was interesting that she said that. And I said, well, let me see if I can write something for that piece, that part of the show, which really seemed like the heart of the show in terms of the emotional impact. And she said, that's exactly right. And she loved it. I had it scored and sent it to her, and she loved it, but the show closed. So it's interesting that it's kind of going full circle, because I wrote another song for her that's on this album called See Me As I Am. And that's getting a lot of traction, actually. And she just sang it for a Black Voices and Cabaret show out of Chicago a couple of weeks ago. And I have that video, which I'm going to kind of do to help more people know her, because she's not as well known in the cabaret world as she was in the opera world. But I wrote both of those songs for her, and that goes in a show. See Me As I Am goes in a show that she has, a cabaret show called Bridge Over Muddied Waters, which has gotten a lot of acclaim, but she hasn't been able to do it the last year because none of the venues are open, you know, where she's performed the show. So it's interesting for me to take two songs that I wrote for another artist and put them on my own album. And I really didn't intend to do that. But when I went to Nashville for the pre-production, I played them all. And my producer was like, you've just got to put those on there. You just got to put those on there. I'm like, well, okay. So that's how they ended up on there. But since then, and especially since this new video has just come out, even though the album's 2 or 3 years old, I'm really excited about using it, hopefully using it and sharing it in a way that really does something to help really the terrible homeless crisis we have in the country. So I'm hoping that that it kind of comes full circle. I wrote it for a character in a show, and it turns out that I might be able to help real people. So I'm pretty excited about that.
This isn't your only foray into that sort of thing. You are the executive co-producer of an award-winning film about Shelley Wright's coming out story called Wish Me Away. How did you get involved in that project, and why was it interesting to you?
You know, I got involved. I met the directors down in Houston. A friend of mine was going to sign on as one of the producers, and you know, she invited me and some people over to meet the directors, and I'd never met Shelley, but, you know, I read a little bit about her story, and I saw a lot of the raw footage of the film, and I was just totally captivated. And the editor of the film, and I don't remember her name because I've never met her, but she was a musician. So what she had done, and just the music wasn't online yet on the film, but what I could see she had done is she had taken Shelley's own music and edited in a way that her own music was the soundtrack for her story. And, you know, I was really, really impressed with the way that happened. And so over the, you know, because we had a lot of good successes with the film, winning a lot of awards in the different, you know, film festivals. And so I got to know Shelley going to a lot of those different places. And we've never co-written anything, but I think a lot of her as a person. And then she's a really excellent musician. And she's not doing country per se anymore, but I've been to quite a few of her shows, and I helped get her down to Houston for a big show at church there and was doing it for coming out week. And it was a very big professional gig for her, but we were the people that had helped produce the show, were kind of the liaisons to get that to happen. And I'm telling you, she just blew everybody away. And it was only about 4 or 5 songs and her story. And she's a decent guitar player, but she didn't bring her guitar player. She got a guy that came from LA. And there were probably about 1,000 people in this audience. And I think she must have stayed about 3 hours. She would have signed anybody's t-shirt. I mean, she ran out of merch. Everybody was like crying and telling her their stories. And it was so moving. So I really, I felt like I was supporting another musician and a genuinely nice person. And I really think that film has done a lot of good for a lot of people. So I've never regretted having signed on as one of the co-producers. And we got to make quite a few suggestions as producers. We think this scene will work. We think that won't. Let's do this. Let's do that. So it was kind of fun to play producer for a while.
Right. Well, what's next for you? I know you have an album coming out, I think.
I do. You mentioned my single, Silence Is Not Golden, and I really thought that was going to be the title track, but I think the title track is going to be the next single, which is called Ready for a Change. And I think it incorporates a few more kinds of songs. I didn't want it just to be a heavy message. At first it was going to be an EP. Now it's going to be an album. And, one thing's led to another. On my show last night, at my live stream last night, I did a song that's a little bit country-esque. It's called Oh Colorado. And I thought, well, that's not going to fit on the album that I'm working on now or the next one. But I thought, I like the vibe. It could be, anything could be about a change, right? So
Yeah, right.
I asked my fans last night on the show, I said, hey, do you think I could include that? And actually my producer hopped on the last 10 minutes because she goes a live stream right after I do. So I always like, if I see her on, I always like to say, oh, you should stay on and watch Katie's show right after mine. And yada, yada, yada. And all these people said, yes, put it on the album, put it on the album. And so I said, Katie, I guess we're not quite through yet with that album. So we're looking to do, I've done all my part, and she's going in next week. Our studio here that we use is a fantastic studio. And during that big storm we had a week or so ago, not related to the ice storm we had, I mean, it's been crazy weather down here, a pipe burst in the main room of the studio. So that's going to happen next week, but that's my last track. Well, my now next to last track I'm going to put on there, but everything's in various stages of getting done, but I'm looking to release probably mid to late summer.
Okay. How are folks going to be able to find it?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. They can go to my website and just harrietreynolds.com, and that'll have all of the information on it. I usually release through CD Baby, and they have a gazillion digital platforms. I can't keep up with all the names. But I also like to connect with my fans through Bandcamp. Because they're a little bit more of they're run by musicians, a little bit of a smaller shop than CD Baby has become. And you can listen to the whole track on there. You don't have to buy it, but you can hear the whole track to really get the feel of if you'd like to buy that or not. So that's where I'm kind of sending more people, and that's on my website. Plus the website will give everybody a heads up on, what I'm doing. And I'm actually going to add a new tab, which is going to be custom songs. I've never really waded into that before, but the producer and I are talking about doing that, since she's got a great studio set up and is a great writer herself. So I don't know whether she's going to be co-writing with me if we get some clients, but she will do the production. So it will be a radio quality professional production for, anniversaries, engagements, graduations, you name it. And I don't see myself doing a lot of those because I'm looking for people who really want to have that special experience. you know, to interview them, have them tell me their stories, and then have me turn that into something that is very special just for them. So that's kind of a little bit of a new venture I'm doing. And as I mentioned earlier, I have another album's worth, and I think that's going to probably come out hopefully in the beginning of 22. So I really try to get that content out there because it's a different world than when I started out and with that first album, you know.
Absolutely. And you've made it clear on your website that you are interested in doing house parties. How far will you go if someone calls you?
Now that's a great question. I'm not sure I get all of the entendres there, but
That's not what I meant. I meant, how far distance will you go?
Of course not. Interested, we really have to talk about that. And I haven't done one in a year because most of them are pretty packed. I did one, the release party that I did for Take That Ride, I did in this great series called Bakery Lofts in Jersey City, New Jersey. And they hold about 40 people, and they have an amazing setup. And then I did one in Houston. There were probably about 80 people in the living room. That was a big
house party. Yeah, that's big.
Yeah. So, you know, how far I will go, if you want sort of minimums, I need to have about 20 or 30 people there. And I have noticed that some of my colleagues here that do house shows are starting to offer them to people only outside. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I haven't really heard. I have been in touch with the venues. I just booked my first in-person gig for August 1st, which is great. It's a big fundraiser for the music school in Whitefish, Montana, where I go in the summers. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be, it's a big outdoor theater. All of the artists are only going to get to sing 2 songs, but there's a house band if you want to take them charts or whatever, or you can do it solo. So that's going to be fun. And then I'm really hoping in the fall that things do open up when I come back to Texas, because really house parties and house concerts are really one of my favorite ways to play. I do a whole year's worth of those shows all over the country if I could book them. You know, I'd really love to do that. So thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, I have that tab on there. I don't know if anybody's ever gone to look at it. You know, I haven't ever had any stranger contact me and say, hey, I saw your website. I saw that tab.
How far will you go?
Yeah, really. Yeah, you get there are no guests.
Right.
But really, I have loved doing them, and every host that I've done them for has just been fantastic. And it's really a great way for them to bring people into their home for a special kind of experience. So
anybody that wants you for that can contact you through the website. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Well, as long as I'm going to run it through you first, Adam.
Oh,
I'm going to make sure you vet them, and then we can talk.
And you're not getting any gigs, and I'm all over the country. What happened?
Yeah, what happened? No, that would be great. And thanks for mentioning that, because that's one aspect of live performance that I really get. It's not quite as great live streaming, but it feels similar in the sense that you can see comments, you know, that people are making. And at the end of the show or the next morning, I go through and answer all the comments. And there's some interaction. Some people have MCs. I'm just doing it by myself. So I can't always catch every comment while I'm playing and looking at my guitar and checking the lyrics out over here, you know, that sort of thing.
Well, Harriet Reynolds, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on our show today.
Adam, I love your show, and I'm going to become a new fan of other people on your show. And I love that you are, you know, your background little research is fabulous, and I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my stuff.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you very much. I hope you'll check out some of the interviews we've already done. There's a lot of good stuff there. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and can I just follow you on YouTube, on your channel there?
Yes, and thank you for asking. And I'll tell everyone that's watching, all you do is subscribe. I post something every week. Usually it's an interview, but we also have other features. Jazz hacks, if you want to learn something about jazz really quickly. There's little jazz backdoors that I teach too. That might be of interest to you as a jazz theory student.
It would be of great interest, and I may have to sign up for the 101 failed classical pianist.
We could take care of you there too. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And thank you all for watching today. We always love to have you watch and follow with us. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And if you have any questions, you can reach me through the Willow School at willowschoolga.com. Thanks, everyone. We will see you next time.